The United States houses over 2 million people in its prisons and jails. Despite having less than 5% of the global population, it holds over 20. The goal is structural deterrence, achieved through impenetrable isolation and the calculated infliction of discomfort. The Scandinavian model operates on an entirely different premise, known as the positivist school, which pursues what is called the rehabilitative ideal, which raises a pressing empirical question. Why do environments explicitly engineered to deter crime fail to actually deter it? A prison's physical architecture is merely a philosophical theory cast in concrete. By examining the blueprints, we can test which theory survives empirical scrutiny. The axioms of the classical school trace back to the 18th century, heavily influenced by the philosopher Jeremy Bentham. This is a visualization of Bentham's pleasure-pain principle. He argued that humans are rational actors who calculate their actions by weighing the pain of punishment against the pleasure or gain of committing a crime. The U.S. justice system built its foundation on this assumption. To stop crime, the system attempts to artificially maximize the cost variable on that scale. This theoretical premise accelerated sharply in the 1980s. Political platforms, notably during the Reagan administration, weaponized the cost variable through the war on drugs, implementing strict truth in sentencing and mandatory minimums. This drove an explosion in the prison population, establishing mass incarceration as the primary tool for social control. But this model contains a fatal structural vulnerability. Its success strictly requires every criminal to be a perfectly rational actor, capable of calculating long-term consequences in the heat of the moment. Between the 1930s and 1970s, Scandinavian countries began dismantling this exact model. They adopted the positivist framework. Pioneered by figures like Cesare Lombroso, this school shifted focus away from moral philosophy and toward the scientific study of the offender, using emerging medical and psychological data. Positivism rejects the idea of universal rational choice. Instead, it posits that criminality is a symptom of specific antecedent causes. The model tracks specific, measurable variables. It analyzes biological deficits, unstable environments, and a lack of education as the primary drivers feeding into criminal behavior. The Nordic welfare state integrated this medicalized view directly into its legal policy, ensuring that the justice system functioned as an extension of social services. Under this framework, crime is not treated as a moral failure requiring pain. It is a measurable behavioral deficit requiring targeted intervention. The ultimate test of these two theories is how they physically manifest into built environments. The American supermax cell is the purest physical manifestation of classical deterrence theory. The operational goal of this architecture is static security. It relies on total environmental deprivation to maximize the cost of the crime. Clinical data on sensory deprivation shows that prolonged exposure to this environment predictably induces hallucinations, severe paranoia, and violent outbursts. By completely removing interpersonal contact, this form of static security degrades the subject's neurological baseline, destroying their ability to ever reintegrate into a normal community. The Scandinavian architectural response looks entirely different. This is Suomenlinna Island in Finland. It operates as an open prison, completely devoid of traditional perimeter walls or guard towers. It is designed around a strict policy called normalization, which dictates that the only punishment an inmate receives is the restriction of liberty. The daily routine must closely mirror life on the outside. Instead of static security, these facilities use dynamic security. Safety is maintained through continuous, required interaction between inmates and staff. Dynamic security forces inmates to practice interpersonal conflict resolution. They cook their own meals, wear their own clothes, and learn to navigate real-world friction without resorting to violence. In these environments, the architecture limits or enables certain social behaviors. Caging humans suppresses social capacity, while a normalized environment demands its use. To test the long-term results of the classical deterrence model, we can look at the empirical data. This Bureau of Justice graph tracks American offenders 9 years post-release. For violent, property, and drug crimes, the failure trajectories are identical, curving steeply upward and reaching 83.8%. Compare this against the Nordic model's flat baseline, under 20%. The empirical data shows that maximizing isolation and punishment fails to deter future crime. Instead, it reliably produces the high recidivism rates seen in the US model. There is one specific intervention that disrupts this 80% failure rate. When we isolate the variables, education emerges as the primary control factor. A comprehensive 2015 analysis by researcher L. Hall, drawing from multiple datasets, including U.S. federal prison case studies, evaluated the impact of higher education programs inside correctional facilities. The analysis revealed a dramatic statistical drop in recidivism risk, but exclusively for those inmates who actively completed educational programs or vocational training. In the Nordic open prison model, universal access to education is a non-negotiable, fully funded pillar of the system. Conversely, the U.S. model frequently defunds education and vocational training to subsidize the massive overhead costs required to maintain structural static security. Cognitive restructuring and skill acquisition are the active empirical ingredients in reducing reoffending. Structural deprivation offers no such benefit. This forces a final reevaluation of the classical school's core assumption, universal rationality. Deterrence instantly fails when applied to populations already suffering from antecedent deficits. You cannot logically deter an action driven by extreme poverty or severe mental illness simply by threatening future pain. Legal scholars like Francis A. Allen have noted the complexities of the positivist approach. Implementing the rehabilitative ideal requires navigating difficult definitions of what constitutes a cured or adjusted citizen. While defining societal adjustment is philosophically complex, the mechanical data of the rehabilitative ideal is undeniable. The Nordic model succeeds by applying clinical rigor to behavior. It treats environment as a tool for stabilization, prioritizing behavioral science over moral retribution. The data proves that a justice system must inevitably make a choice. It can engineer its architecture to inflict moral pain, or it can design it to build human capacity. It cannot do both.